The first 24 hours has seen a blizzard of executive orders declaring a state of emergency on the southern border, pulling out of the World Health Organization, revoking birthright citizenship, but also plenty of theatre too.
Oh,
What's in there?
thank you, Peter. It could have been years before we found this. Wow. This foreign trip typically has been with UK, but I did it with Saudi Arabia last time.
Dismay in Europe and indeed elsewhere as Mr. Trump pulls out of the Paris Climate Agreement once again. So what will that mean for global warming? It is not working. After the Southport murders, the PM admits the state must do more to protect people from violent loners. And to judge or not to judge, a day of some chaos at Prince Harry's trial against Rupert Murdoch's newspapers. So what is not going on?
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby in Washington.
Good evening from Washington, where President Trump has been true to his word that he would hit the ground running when his second term began. Yet in pardoning or commuting the sentences of 1,500 rioters from the storming of the Capitol behind me here, he went even further than many expected. Among the hostages, as the president calls them, were some guilty of attacking police officers. Yet they were cleared of their crimes at the stroke of a broad-nibbed permanent marker. Some are already free. Waiting with their families outside jail today was Robert, who of course was inside the Capitol reporting on its storming 4 years ago.
They gathered outside the city jail, waiting in anticipation of the release of the January the 6th prisoners. Seeing this not just as the week of the inauguration, but as a time of liberation. Many Trump loyalists have been praying for this moment, including Ben Pollock.
Oh, it's ecstatically emotional. I can't describe it. It's like a new chapter.
His son and daughter were convicted for being part of the mob that stormed the Capitol 4 years ago.
And what will you say to your son and daughter when they come out of that jail?
Tell them how proud I am of them and how much I love them.
How proud you are.
I am proud of them children. I'm proud of every one of the J6ers that showed up on January 6th.
And a Trump lawyer was even at the scene, highlighting that there's not just a new sheriff in town, but an entirely new narrative.
This injustice is ending in America tonight, and this dark chapter in our country's history is coming to an end. So,
This is a decision and a series of pardons that will thrill Trump supporters. It will also infuriate many other Americans.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages.
This was the very first act in the Oval Office of his second term, overturning the largest criminal investigation in American history.
Full pardon.
With just a stroke of his pen.
USA! USA!
Every rioter and would-be insurrectionist from that dark day for American democracy will be freed.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
Almost all will have their criminal records wiped clean. Lost on no one is the irony that much of the fighting we filmed back then took place in the Rotunda, the magnificent room under the Capitol dome. The exact same space where Trump was sworn in yesterday. For those badly injured in the maelstrom of January the 6th. This is the body cam video of police officer Michael Fanone. The return of Trump and these pardons is a body blow of another kind.
Rest assured, I have been betrayed by my country. 6 individuals who assaulted me as I did my job on January 6th, as did hundreds of other law enforcement officers, will now walk free.
The Proud Boys, a militant pro-Trump group, were already on the streets ahead of the pardons on Inauguration Day. After operating largely underground for the 4 years of the Biden presidency, they have a renewed swagger, sensing they have a firm ally in the Oval Office.
We are very happy about Trump's presidency. We support him and back him wholeheartedly, yes.
Those walking free include Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who was serving 22 years behind bars. To Donald Trump, this is a case of a promise made, and now a promise kept.
And Robert is outside the prison where the releases continue tonight. Robert, on a lot of levels, this isn't surprising. Donald Trump said he was going to do exactly this, and he's done it. But I think what many people find startling is the complete parallel history here being written, that he actually won the election, that these people were patriots, that they were then hostages, and now justice has been served. For you who witnessed it particularly, that must be somewhat discombobulating.
It is an extraordinary fact that we've got sort of two narratives here. These releases, incidentally, behind me have been inexplicably delayed, even after that executive order was signed by Donald Trump. But, it is expected to happen. The Bureau of Prisons, least bureaucracies. But you're right. I mean, essentially, the story of January the 6th was always sort of two narratives. Two stories in many ways. To liberal America, it was a shocking and dark day in which sort of American democracy was hanging by a thread for a few hours on January the 6th, 2021. But, conservative America, particularly for Trump supporters, they always saw it as completely different. It was a display for them of not of insurrectionists, but of patriots. It was about exercising their First Amendment rights, and not just exercising those rights, but doing so in the people where they have the greatest rights of all. So always those two narratives have taken place, and what we've seen really with this executive order is exactly what you allude to, Tom, which is a rewriting of history. And what's so striking now is it isn't just about signing an executive order, it is about the result of that, which has been to embolden groups, far-right groups like the Proud Boys, but also the Oath Keepers. The leader of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, is here right now giving a press conference. So all of those people are feeling emboldened. Donald Trump promised radical change. Well, this is what it looks like.
OK, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Well, this evening there was a slight pause, if you can call it that, in the speed of new policy, with the kind of understatement we'll probably come to expect from the president's new press secretary. She promised a massive announcement. Not much sign of it just yet. It was supposed to happen more than an hour ago and focus on everyone's favourite subject, infrastructure. Mr. Trump hasn't had it all his own way, though. A bishop at the morning's inauguration service accused him of scaring people with his policies.
Since before the war, newly inaugurated presidents have attended Washington Cathedral. Today, President Trump's presence here was spun as a moment to overcome a divisive election. The sermon, though, carried a pointed message.
Unity is not partisan, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away.
Donald Trump was stony-faced. J.D. Vance, less so. Despite the promise of unity, their first 24 hours in office have been combative, rolling back Biden's policies with gusto. Afterwards, the president confirmed what most in the cathedral could have guessed.
I didn't think it was a good service, no.
Last night at the White House, Donald Trump wasted no time, signing a flurry of executive orders ranging from pulling out of the Paris climate deal and the World Health Organization to authorizing new energy exploration and cracking down on immigration.
Taking a large number of executive actions to secure our southern border.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
And then, while sitting at the Resolute desk, a gift from Queen Victoria, the president suggested his first official trip might not be to America's closest ally.
So first foreign trip typically has been with UK. But we did it, I did it with Saudi Arabia last time because they agreed to buy $450 billion worth of our product.
And there were snubs too for America's immediate neighbours, with threats of tariffs.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
And then this happened.
President Trump, did President Biden leave you a letter?
He may have. Wait. Don't they leave it in the desk? I don't know. Oh.
What's in there?
Thank you, Peter. It could have been years before we found this thing. Wow. Thank you.
Can you read that on the outside?
Maybe we should all read it together.
Let's read it.
So far, the contents remain unknown. But today, from his new Secretary of State, there was clarity on how Donald Trump will calibrate his foreign policy.
Everything we do must be justified by the answer to one of three questions. Does it make us stronger? Does it make us safer? And does it make us more prosperous?
Political saber rattling, and last night, the real thing. Donald Trump says this is a golden age of America, but this promises to be one of the most radical, unpredictable and partisan administrations in recent American history. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Now, when China, the world's biggest polluter, of course, criticises you for pulling out of the Paris climate change agreement, even President Trump must wonder, or at least perhaps he does, even if just for a moment, whether he's on the right course. Let's go over to Martin to take us through what Mr. Trump has decided and the impact it is likely to have. Martin.
Well, Donald Trump has previously described climate change as a hoax. So one of his first pledges after taking office was to drill, baby drill, for more oil and gas. He has already started the year-long process of withdrawing from the international Paris Climate Agreement, which aims to keep warming below 1.5 degrees. Plus, he's signed an executive order to enable drilling offshore and in the Arctic. He's scrapped electric car targets and blocked new wind farms from being built. So what impact could all of this have? Well, let's start by looking at the current picture. The top three polluters in order are China in blue, then the USA, then India. The UK is the thin slit we emit about 1/12 of the amount America does. Per head, the US is the worst performing of the four, emitting nearly twice as much per person per year than China. And over Trump's previous 4 years, he actually approved fewer fossil fuel licenses than Joe Biden, and average emissions, as you can see, went down slightly, but at a much slower rate than targeted, and partly because the dip you can see at the end of the graph there is due to the pandemic. Now here is what US emissions need to do to hit net zero by 2050, and here is the track analysts from Carbon Brief estimate Trump's policies put us on at the moment. They calculate his policies will contribute an extra 4 billion tonnes of carbon by 2030. For context, that is twice as much as the world saved through wind, solar and other green tech worldwide over the last 5 years combined. Finally, we have the international impact. At the moment, only Yemen, Libya and Iran aren't part of the Paris Agreement. But as the US joins them, what's to stop other countries doing the same? Argentina is apparently already considering doing just that. And how do you persuade the other big polluting countries? This is the key bit. Countries like China, India and Brazil to make green policy decisions which might be more expensive if America isn't willing to do the same.
Martin, thank you very much. Well, it has been, as we've said, a heck of a first 24 hours, and Dan is here to make sense of it all for us. But before we do that, can I just ask you, we've just heard that Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who admittedly is now no fan of Mr. Trump and has criticised him often, indeed he sat on this chair on US election night doing exactly that. We're told that he's had his security, he's had many credible death threats. We're told that he's had his security detail removed. Is that true?
That's what is being reported. That's right. He has Secret Service protection because of the level of threat perceived against him by Iran, primarily. So just to rewind a bit, as you mentioned, he was Trump's national security advisor in his first administration. He's a Republican figure going way back under Bush, served as ambassador to the United Nations. He was very aggressively pushing Donald Trump to pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal, which did happen. They then had a falling out, and as you say, John Bolton became one of Donald Trump's fiercest critics. His Secret Service protection was removed then when they fell out after the first administration. It was reinstated by Joe Biden and has now apparently in the last hour or so been removed again. And given that the Department of Justice actually charged an Iranian Revolutionary Guard official with plotting his murder, you know, this isn't a theoretical threat. You know, there have been actionable threats that they have investigated. Now, John Bolton has been really pointed in his criticism about Donald Trump, saying he's unfit to be president. He said that the last 4 years were bad and the next 4 years would be worse. So you've got to wonder whether this is a very personal act of retribution on Donald Trump's part.
Dan, we'll come back to you at the end of the programme to just give us your summary of the first 24 hours and what lies ahead. But back home now, and for a Prime Minister and former head of the prosecution service, it was quite an admission. Sir Keir Starmer called a news conference in Downing Street to say that the way the state protects people from violent loners and misfits just simply isn't working. He was referring, of course, to the man who killed 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift holiday dance class. Sir Keir didn't offer a solution, it must be said, other than a review of terrorism laws, but he insisted there was no cover-up by the authorities at the time about the killer's background.
Alice, Bibi and Elsie, theirs are the names to remember. As for their killer, today we were promised serious failures will not be forgotten either. This morning the Prime Minister was out on the front foot to front up about many missed interventions.
The tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. I will not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure. Failure which, in this case, frankly, leaps off the page.
Today we obtained this photo of Axel Rudikabana at an acting academy. A public inquiry will now look at the missed signs of the role he aspired to. In 2019, he was excluded from Range High School in Formby over claims he was carrying a knife. After his exclusion, he returned to the school and assaulted someone with a hockey stick. Today we learned he admitted carrying a knife at least another 9 times and was even able to buy one on Amazon. That's despite the fact he was known to police, the courts, social services, mental health services and others. He was even referred to the Counter-Terrorism Prevent programme 3 times, but wasn't deemed a terrorist, which the Prime Minister wants to review.
Britain now faces a new threat. Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like Al-Qaeda. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom.
We have known for years that around a third of terrorists in prison follow no clear ideology. Rudikabana will now be treated as one, despite police originally stating otherwise. With the government facing questions over why it didn't say more about his case sooner to fill the void of information exploited by the riots.
I was in Southport on the day of the attacks. There was a short window in which information could have been released before charge, before any risk of prejudicing a trial. Why didn't you do that?
The law carefully restricts what can be said by anyone, not just me as Prime Minister, but anybody. And you would be putting very different questions to me if I had disclosed information and we were now faced with a decision that the trial had just collapsed and the families would never get justice.
Less than 6 months since the Prime Minister laid flowers for the Southport victims. Now he's promising they may even be remembered by a change in the law. Paul Brand, News at 10.
The clash between Prince Harry and the Murdoch media empire, through their lawyers at least, always had the potential for some court drama. And just as the Prince's case of illegal information gathering against the publishers of The Sun was about to start, lawyers asked for a delay, then another, and then another. John was in court to talk about all this. John, it sounds like frankly, a rather remarkable day in court. He's always said that he was determined to get News Group to accept responsibility for what he claimed they'd done, and he needed a trial to do it. So what's going on?
Well, Tom, there is brinkmanship, and then there is what unfolded here in the case of the Duke of Sussex versus News Group newspapers today. Frankly, it resembled a high-stakes game of deal or no deal. We had the rival lawyers teaming up to force one adjournment after another, and when the judge could take no more, off they went to the Court of Appeal to ensure there could be no hearing today. All this to ensure, we were told, further time for intense negotiations between the two sides. Of course, News Group newspapers have paid out about £1 billion to about 1,300 claimants so far, without ever admitting liability for any wrongdoing at the Sun. So could there be a deal in the offing for Prince Harry? Well, all I can tell you is to quote a lawyer for the newspaper group saying the reality is that we are really, really close. But for Harry, of course, Tom, this has always been about much more than money. He says it's about justice. This is his mission. It would seem very difficult for him to back down at this 11th hour plus without getting an acknowledgement from NGN that there was thoroughgoing wrongdoing at the Sun, perhaps sanctioned at a high level, something that newspaper group has strenuously denied from the very beginning of this. Still, if there is a deal overnight, it is perfectly possible, Tom, that a case 5 years in the making might not ever reach trial.
John, sounds like another interesting day tomorrow, but thank you very much indeed. Now, a terrible fire at a busy hotel in a ski resort in northwestern Turkey has killed at least 76 of the people who were staying there. Nearly 240 guests were asleep in the 12-story hotel in the Karugla Mountains. 4 people, including the hotel's owner, have been arrested. At least 2 of the dead had jumped from their windows. Now let's move back to events here in Washington, and President Trump's urgency to get things done is alarming many Ukrainians. They are worried that if he pressurizes President Zelensky to agree a hasty peace deal with Russia, Ukrainian lives lost in nearly 3 years of war will have been in vain.
Ukraine is paying a high price for Russia's war. No one will say exactly how many have been killed, though officially it's said to be 30,000. In reality, it's likely to be far, far more. Every day across this nation, there are funerals for those killed on the front line. The ceremony, scant comfort for the sacrifice. So what acceptable peace can Donald Trump propose after such unacceptable loss?
Big quantity of operations.
Those who have served and survived are adamant Ukraine cannot simply surrender to Russia. Artem, a photographer before the war, lost part of his hand and leg in a drone attack in August. This is the first day he's walked since.
I want that this war stop, but I don't want to give Russians our land. It's very important because all lives, all those people who we are lost in this war, it will be not,
almost wasted.
Yeah, wasted.
The Superhuman Centre in Lviv treats those with the most complicated war injuries, making prostheses on an industrial scale such as the demand. Alexei lost both legs and an arm.
Something flew right into the trench where I was. I don't know what it was. When I opened my eyes, they asked me if I was alive. I saw that my arm was torn off and my legs were gone. It's understandable that we want peace, but we want it to end fairly, so that we don't give up a piece of our land.
50,000 people have lost limbs in this war so far. Many more will if it continues. That is why there is such desperation for peace, but not at any cost.
It's not just those in service who are paying the price of this war. Yaroslav Basilevich's entire family were killed 4 months ago when a shell hit their home in Lviv.
This is your wife,
Yes.
Evgenia?
Ярина старша, дочка,
21.
Дар'я середня і наймолодша Емілія.
Daria was 18 and Emilia 7.
Yes.
He longs for peace delivered by President Trump or anyone, even though his personal peace is lost forever.
Прийнятним був би вихід.
It would only be acceptable if Russia became small again. I don't know if we will have the strength to fight to the end. We need the help of the West.
Yaroslav's family were buried next to each other, 4 crosses side by side, to mark 4 lives taken in a war they played no part in. His daughter's friends fear for the future of their country and the world they're growing up in.
What kind of deal do you want? What's acceptable to you?
It won't stop with Ukraine, and it's a problem for all of the world, you know. So we really need help from the West, because we won't be able to stand alone without this help.
So you need a deal that strengthens Ukraine and weakens Russia?
Yeah.
Donald Trump wants this war over quickly. Unlike in business, the deals he makes now have the power of life and death for a nation. Like him, Ukraine doesn't want a forever war, but it has sacrificed a lot and will not accept peace at any price. Emma Murphy, News at 10, Lviv.
Well, as I said at the end of the programme, we come back to Dan to reflect on. We said it was going to be a news tsunami, but bloomin' heck. I mean, it's been quite just. It felt like there's been a news story every 10 minutes. What do you make of the first 24 hours?
Yeah, it feels like it's been 24 hours that's lasted a month, doesn't it? I mean, dizzying pace of events. I think the president is speaking, or has just finished speaking at the moment in the White House, announcing another initiative, this thing called Stargate, which is going to be this huge AI infrastructure project. He was there in the White House, flanked by tech CEOs, including Sam Altman from OpenAI. And this isn't just a sort of theoretical idea. They're going to start building data centers in Texas. They're talking about 10 huge buildings going up, power plants as well, $500 billion investment. But when you step back, one of the kind of remarkable things I think over the last 24 hours is the central role that these sort of tech barons seem to be playing in this new Trump administration. You know, we had the Gilded Age of America in the late 19th century with the robber barons. Well, now Trump has announced the Golden Age of America, and we've got the tech barons instead. And, you know, they are being incredibly aggressive straight out of the gates, as they said they would. They promised they would be in terms of getting their initiatives underway. We've had, you know, dozens of presidential executive orders. And so it seems this is going to be a pretty busy year, pretty busy 4 years ahead.
Dan, thank you very much indeed. Well, it's been a heck of a few days. It's been a privilege to be here reporting on it all for you. But that's it from Washington for now. Good night, and thank you very much for watching.
Tomorrow,